I thought I'd be playing football for the next 10 or 12 years. And he said, well, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. He said, what about education? I said, well, I'm two classes shy of an education degree. And then Bum started to tell me about he actually started out as a high school football coach in Nederland, Texas. And many of you know who Bum Phillips is. Anyway, he said it's a great profession. High school coaching is outstanding. And when I left that day, I took a settlement, partial settlement with my contract. And about 6 weeks later, I was on the football field coaching. Spent 32 years as a coach. And I think the thing that excites me the most, or one of the greatest things I think honors I've ever received as a coach, was the late great Billy Graham. It's been quoted several times, and he had said that a football coach has as much influence on a child, or the numbers of children, as the average person does in a lifetime. In 1 year, a football coach can have that type of influence. And I really didn't take it to heart until I got into it. And I went back to a funeral this past weekend to a player that dropped dead. He got to go play golf that morning. He had just turned 50 a week ago, and he fell over dead of a heart attack. And so, you know, I walked over there. I went to the funeral, and as I walked into the funeral, it was kind of neat because I've been out for a few years now, and I could hear some whispers. There's Coach Talbert. That's Coach Talbert. And you know, I hadn't been there hadn't coached that guy in 34 years, and it was nice to be remembered. Obviously, I wasn't in my coaching attire. I was dressed up for the funeral, and it was nice to be noticed. And, you know, every day of my life, I have someone who contacts me that I was a former player of. And I think the greatest thing that, I read a statistic today because I didn't want to be wrong about it. It said that 13.6 million in the United States single parents raising kids. And it's a number that's increased over the years. Today, the statistic is there's estimated 21 million kids that are being raised in a home with one parent. And, you know, this isn't a pulpit to preach, but I'll tell you this, I really honestly believe, and I would best believe that you probably do too, it takes two parents to really raise a kid. And the individuals that have to do it by themselves, I take my hat off to them. Some of them do a wonderful job. But obviously that's not the way it was supposed to be made. It'd take a genius to figure that out. That a man, a woman, a kid, a child needs that. And unfortunately, however the case may be, as a coach, we end up being a father figure. And I'm not going to be talking to you till this time next week, but I can assure you, I could, if I chose to, tell you one story after another of experiences I've had with coaching children and the impact that a coach has on those kids. I was telling Douglas, I wore the whistle just so if I didn't look like a coach, at least you could see the whistle hanging there and know that I actually did. I actually retired because of health reasons. I've had a couple of heart attacks, and I'm a type A guy. I'm one of those guys that runs up and down the sidelines, puts a lot of passion into it, and my doctors pretty much retired me, told me he didn't think it was in my best interest to keep coaching. I met some marvelous coaches in my career. Some of them I grew to know quite well. Some of them I just met through other people. Tom Landry, I got to know quite well before he passed as a young child, growing up in Dallas. I got the privilege of picking up Gene Stallings, who was our guest speaker, and when I was working in Bernie, Texas, and I was the defensive coordinator and assistant coach. And if you're an Aggie, you know who Gene Stallings is, or somebody from Alabama. Either way, you know who Gene is. I picked him up. It took me an hour and 15 minutes round trip to take you back and forth. And if you're around a guy for that long, you know what kind of gentleman he is. And just that hour and 15 minutes he told me some fantastic things. Like I said, I played for Bum Phillips. I knew his son Wade Phillips, who's still coaching. I met Darryl Royal, Frank Broyles, Spike Dykes is a personal friend of mine, Barry Switzer, Hayden Fry. I think the scariest moment of my life, I interviewed for a lot of jobs, and really never wasn't my tendency to get nervous in front of a person or interview, because I would prepare quite well for my interviews. But Forrest Gregg had chosen to come back to SMU. Now, I think most of this audience probably knows who Forrest Gregg is, but I'll remind you if you don't. If you read in Vince Lombardi's autobiography, you know who Vince Lombardi is. That's who they give the Super Bowl trophy in his name every year. Was a Green Bay Packers coach. He said in his autobiography, the greatest football coach greatest football player I ever coached was Forrest Gregg. Most coaches would name a Joe Montana. They'd name a quarterback or a running back or receiver. But he said the greatest football player he ever coached was Forrest Gregg. And Forrest Gregg was a big lineman. And I had a friend of mine that I had coached with that had coached me in college. And he had worked for a while on the staff with Forrest Gregg. Well, Forrest went back, that was after the death penalty at SMU, and he went back to work at SMU. And I asked this buddy of mine, could you get me an interview? Because he had come out in the Dallas Morning News saying he wanted to hire up his 10 coaches. He was looking for 4 Texas high school coaches that he wanted to add to his staff. So I really was going to give up being a head coach at Palestine and hopefully pursue one of those positions. I did get the interview, but I didn't get the job. But as I was waiting in line and the guy came out in front of me, I was starting to go in. I had my briefcase, had my jacket, my tie on. I was ready to interview with Forrest Gregg. And I walked in, and he was sitting behind his desk. His secretary walked me in. And, you know, when you look at a guy that's some of y'all's age or older, Forrest would be now, I was intimidated by his size. He stood up, he shook my hand. He was a huge man. He had his Super Bowl rings on. And for some reason, I sat across from his desk, and the chair that I was sitting in seemed like it was 2 foot lower than Forrest Gregg was sitting. And he was just like a bear. His hand was like a slab of bacon when he stuck it out to shake my hand. And I literally, for the first time in my life, I started stuttering. He'd ask me a question, and I was just really blubbering. I really couldn't get what I was wanting to say out. And he asked me, he said, I was 28 years old at the time. He said, son, are you nervous? And I said, yes, sir, I am. He goes, what are you nervous about? And I said, you're Forrest Gregg. And he said, yeah. Kind of snickered. And I said, well, you're the greatest football player that Vince Lombardi ever coached. And he said, well, I read that, but he said, that's not a true statement, but it was quite an honor for Coach Lombardi to say that. And he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll come around this desk. And he did. He came around, and just a huge guy. Even at that age, he was still a huge man. And we sat down over on the couch, and he put his arm around me, and we just had the interview. And it was a great interview, and they had one more position open, and I didn't get it. They were looking for a secondary coach. I was a linebacker. So anyway, a lot of coaches influenced my life. They were important in my life. And one other quick story. How many of you know who Frank Broyles was? He was a coach at the Razorbacks for many, many years. He was the athletic director for many years. Well, he had just won the Southwest Conference. Actually, it was a 3-way tie. A&M, you'll remember this. This was 1975. A&M, Texas, and Arkansas tied for the Southwest Conference Championship. They all lost one game, and each one of them lost to each other. Well, the way the Southwest Conference rules for the Cotton Bowl was then, that's where the Southwest Conference champion played, was a team that had not been to the bowl in the longest period of time would go to the Cotton Bowl. Well, A&M and Texas both had represented the Southwest Conference, and Arkansas got the deal. A guy in my church by the name of Cuddy Cutsinger was the lead official for the Southland Conference. He was an Arkansas graduate, and I was a junior college football player at Ranger, and I was a linebacker. and I'd finished my freshman year, and Cuddy, my friend, went to church. He just knew he wanted me to be a Razorback. He said, you've got to go play for Arkansas. So that week at the Cotton Bowl, they practiced every day at the Cotton Bowl. They were playing Georgia. They didn't fare real well. They got put on pretty good, I think 31-12. But I went up there and with Cuddy every day, and I watched the practices. And Frank Broyles came by several times, and we visited and talked and everything. And Cuddy introduced me, and at that time I was 193 pounds. I'd started that year in the conference, in the junior college conference, as a middle linebacker, and I was weighing 193 pounds. For even my age, that was still pretty small. And so I tried to stand tall and look bigger than I was. And he said, Coach Broyles said, hey, I want to introduce you to my linebackers coach. And he said, he hollered and said, come on over here and call his. I didn't remember the names. He called them out. And this young guy came jogging over there. I mean, he didn't walk over there to Coach Broyles. He ran over to Coach Broyles. And he shook my hand. And he had the prettiest flat top. You know, remember the flat tops? He had the prettiest flat top I've ever seen. And you're going to understand where I'm going with this in a minute. And he shook my hand, you know, and I was trying to stand tall because I thought, you know, I'd offer for the Razorbacks. That's pretty good. That wouldn't have been my first choice, but at Southwest Conference football, it's far better than Ranger Junior College, believe me. So I said, well, Coach, I'm gonna get a whole lot bigger by the time after this next season. I'll be leaving as a sophomore. He said, son, if you're gonna play for me and you're gonna play for the Razorbacks, he said, I don't care how big you are, but he said, all I care about is the RH factor. And I said, RH factor? He said, yeah, I care about how fast you run and how hard you hit. You knew who that guy was? A guy by the name of Jimmy Johnson. He's still known for his gray hair now. It looks like a helmet on his head. He's on football every Sunday, but that was his motto all the way from Arkansas, all the way through college coaching, and all the way to the NFL. He built his whole team around speed. And so that story got to be a big story to me because he believed that even at that time, and he never faltered. He stuck with it. So I got to meet Jimmy then, and his flat top grew to be what it is today. You know, kids coming with that many kids being single-minded, raising single families, and even kids that are raised with two families, let's be honest, most of the time kids go to school, their parents are already gone to work. Some of them don't see them until late in the evening. And they don't get the discipline. They need structure. And they need accountability. And that's what I liked about football. You can do that in the classroom. You can do that with teaching. You know what? Football is one way that you learn. Every 30 to 45 seconds, you usually either you get knocked on the ground or the guy you're playing against knocks you on the ground. And I've coached kids that have grown on to be pastors, lawyers, engineers, doctors, politicians, educators, and everything. And I've had, through the 32 years I coached and beyond that, I've had so many of them tell me, Coach, I learned more while playing football for you than I learned in all those classes that I took. Now, that's flattering. It's kind of like some of the compliments we give, but I'll tell you what, when a kid tells you that, or a man that's successful, has gone on with his life, and he's overcome obstacles, and he's overcome all the things that they have out there. And, you know, with the addiction problems we have today, with drugs and alcohol, and I'm not so sure that the internet wouldn't be right there with it. The things that the kids get today, my wife is a counselor. I'm not going to go into, she's a counselor in your school district. The stories I hear, that my daughter's a counselor in education in McKinney, have another good friend as a counselor. The stories that they are told, and a lot of it stems off the internet. And unfortunately, these kids need strong people. They need strong influences. And they need the bar to be set high. We don't need to lower the bar so kids can achieve. I'm not one of the old school guys or the old people that when the deal came in to me, when I thought we really started to sink in education, I'm not here to be critical because there's a lot of great educators. But when we started giving us the participation deals for showing up, and kid gets the same trophy as the kid that wins, I like competition. I like capitalism. I'm not a socialist. I want my kids to know they've got to work harder than the other kid to achieve what they want to achieve. And we're all born with different strengths and abilities, and kids need to understand that. The first thing that I try to teach my 3 children and the children that I coach was rule number 1: life is not fair. If life was fair, I'd be 6'5" and have a head full of hair like Tom Selleck, but I don't. And if life was fair, there'd be a lot of things different. We have to learn to make lemonade out of lemons. And that's one of Zig Ziglar's old things, and I'm sure you know who Zig Ziglar is. But, I really feel like that the coaching is something that through FCA and other programs that go beyond the coaching itself, there's other ways that we could do it. Now, I'm going to be 100% honest, and Doug knows this. I didn't give my life to Christ until I was 55 years old. I had actually retired. I gave my kids a great work ethic. I gave my kids the accountability. I gave my kids love. I gave my kids, I bought some hamburgers. I gave a lot of rides home. When kids would get shoes from time to time, they'd show up on their porch. And different things that I did for kids. And don't say I was a bad person, but I had not received Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I told a bunch of kids this Saturday, as they were complimenting me, I said, the only thing I regret, I think I could have been a better influence had I been where I was spiritually, where I am today. But, for whatever the reason, it didn't work out that way. But, coaches, like I said, I could sit up here and tell you, one story after another about how kids, at the end of the day, I think a coach will tell you that the kids probably influenced them and moved them forward as much as the influence you gave them. I had a kid that called me a couple of weeks ago. He was being honored. He was my quarterback in Palestine, and he got a stadium named after him. He was at a 6A school in Las Vegas. His name was Hunky Cooper. He played 15 years of professional ball. He was a heck of an athlete. And he got out and he coached high school in Las Vegas at a 6A high school there. And they called him up. He's coaching at San Diego State now with Rocky Long. And he asked me, could I be there? And I actually couldn't have been at that time. I had to turn it down. I said, I can't get there. But they named the stadium after me. So I have no stadium named after me, not yet anyway. I told him, I said, usually they do that after you die. But you're pretty privileged to be 50 years old or to have a stadium named after you. He's a marvelous kid. He was a kid of color. Lost his dad a year and a half before I got there. I could go on and on with these stories. He gives me a lot more credit, believe me, than I deserve. But he spoke at the funeral and he called me by name and gave me a lot of kudos and stuff. But you just never know. And I'm going to finish with this. I've had a lot of kids, and I don't mean to say that the internet's all bad or cell phones are all bad, because there's been some positives out of it. I've had some people re-enter my life that I didn't, had no other way of having contact with it. It had not been for social media. And I try to stay off of it unless I'm going to put something spiritual on there or something patriotic. I'm actually surprised anybody's here today because of the rain threat and the bar Attorney General Barr is testifying. So I figured it might be just me and Doug here today. So thank you for showing up, and thank you for giving me the honor of speaking. And again, I realize it's 5 till, and I told Doug I didn't think I'd speak that long, but I ended up speaking a lot longer, and I've got a whole lot more to say. But I'm gonna give you guys a break, and I'm gonna stop talking. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I appreciate your attention. When you coach and teach, and I was in the classroom, I wish the students I was teaching gave me the attention that you guys have given me today, because they don't always do that. But anyway, thank you so very much, and I'll hang around for a couple of minutes. Anybody's got any questions about anything or just want to ask me something? But thank you for showing up. And only one person left, and she told me she was going to leave early, so I was prepared for it. I know how the Rotaries and stuff are. You speak during lunch, people start to exit because they've got business or meetings or appointments. It's not to be rude.
None of these people have anything to do.
No. Thank you very much.